Hey guys, so I know it's pretty late, but I just I have to rant about this. This is probably the worst article that I have ever seen posted on Slashdot. And just okay, we're just gonna dive right in. Apple wants to kill the ad industry, and it's forcing developers to help. So, as I'm sure a lot of you saw at WWDC, whatever the conference is called, Apple has this idea where just like there's the sign in with Facebook or sign in with Google buttons, there's going to be a new sign in with Apple button. And what you see a picture of there is the sign in with Apple lets you choose what data specifically that you want to share with whoever's having you sign in. And if you don't want to share your email, then it will make this fake email that exists only for that account uniquely, and then it will forward what it says from that app to you directly. And it looks like the, shall we say, digital marketing industry is here to cry about it. Okay, so this is just like explaining what it is. All right. As a consumer, the idea of Apple sign ins is genuinely an exciting one. I don't have to give out my email address to random companies anymore, helping keep my actual email account much more secure. As a person in digital marketing, as well as a coder and startup founder, the feature terrifies me. Apple wants to remove the last piece of control I actually had over my product's marketing. Okay. So, yeah, expect some crying in this article. But it's something else that worries me. I don't have a choice. Apple plans to force developers using third-party sign-in features to add its sign-in along any competing ones, rather than allowing them to make the choice. Essentially, Apple will force its success and remove any sort of control from me over whether or not I want to use it. Okay, okay, okay. So nobody's forcing you to use these third-party sign-in buttons to begin with, and usually when they're used, they are not used with the best of intentions in mind. So he goes on to say, rather than competing on merit or features, Apple is backing developers and small businesses into a corner, forcing them to use the technology and using the App Store again as a tool to further its own reach. What do you mean its own reach? Like, what? If you've ever worked in marketing or run your own business, you'll know the line between marketing and privacy priorities is incredibly thin. It always has been and always will be. Advertising is a necessary evil that funds ideas and business models that users wouldn't otherwise pay for. But it's also a crucial part of reaching new customers at every scale. Okay, so that's just. Okay. Now, it might sound like the guy's trying to make a legitimate case here, but I don't buy it. I don't think that's what's going on. Because advertising has existed as long as any semblance of a free market has. And it has gotten along just fine without having to do surveillance capitalism nonsense. Okay? So, for instance, okay, I'm trying to launch a new VPN service. Okay, so you don't have to use Facebook and Google to like abuse people's private information to like target advertisements at people that AI think are going to buy VPNs. Like that is way overkill and there's just so much wrong with that. I don't even have time to get into it all. But how about you do something crazy like, I don't know, go on Reddit and then advertise in like tech subreddits and advertise on like Slashdot or Newegg or, just generally techie sites, you don't have to get this down to a like per consumer basis with this one to one targeted ad nonsense. Like, stop pretending that your business is going to die if you can't target oddly specific people using unethical means. Just use common sense. Okay, so moving on. So, generally, to reach new customers, you want to advertise to people like your existing ones, usually by creating something called a lookalike audience. Tools like MailChimp, Google AdWords, and Facebook Ad Network allow users to upload email addresses of customers, which are used to understand the type of customer buying your product and to narrow down advertising to similar people. Okay, that's what we just described. So that means, hey Google. So, oh, sorry, I set my thing off. Hey Facebook. So, hey Facebook. Um, so I have this email, and I know you're not allowed to sell data to me, but I have this email of this guy. Can you tell me like everything about his shopping habits? It's just, oh, it's obnoxious. The practice usually shocks people outside the industry. You don't say. Who didn't realize their email address is used in this way? But it's a critical part of reaching the right people rather than blindly paying to target the wrong people, which makes advertising dramatically more expensive. You gotta pay the price of doing business. Like I said, the advertising industry has existed for millennia without this problem. So, no, I don't buy it. Like, starting a startup is supposed to be hard. Alright, so yeah, blah blah blah. This is how targeted advertising works. Apple is likely to win consumers over who think these things sound evil and strange. But without these practices, many of our favorite businesses and services simply couldn't exist or practically reach customers. Again, I don't believe you. Like, no. No, 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 no. No. People figured out what MySpace was before we had targeted advertising. People figured out what Facebook was before we had targeted advertising. People figured out what Friendster was. People, found flaming hot Cheetos. Like, again, this is just crying because they've had a ridiculous unnatural advantage in advertising power and they're crying that they're losing it. Okay. Otherwise, we'd be running ads on Instagram with poor targeting, spending thousands in the hope of reaching the right person at random. I mean, if you weren't using like grossly unethical targeted advertising, then honestly, I don't think it'd be worth advertising on Instagram at all. Unless it's just a product that, would appeal to like everybody. Like Pepsi could advertise on Instagram and be okay. But, if you're trying to advertise something niche, go to where those people are. Like, it's not rocket science. Apple knows this, and that's why it's forcing millions of developers to adopt it rather than convince them to use it. Okay, this is another like thing that I see this in politics all the time, where you know you can't just go into a room full of just absolutely like single-minded, ruthless people who will stop at nothing to continue doing what they're doing and expect them to just be like, "Oh, gee whiz, these business practices are very unethical. So, yeah, I don't deserve all this money I'm making, so I'm going to just stop." Said no one ever. So, yeah, Apple is going to have to force you because that's the only way that you're going to cooperate. That way, Apple drives that ad business and all the other revenue that comes with it back to its own platform To consumers, that might seem great, but it's a dangerous precedent. Okay. There's like a third of a point being made here, and that is the idea that Apple basically is going to be put in the driver's seat here because a lot of people are going to switch to Apple because Apple, like, cares about their privacy. And that's probably true. But again, just with the crying, like, I don't have the number handy, but the overwhelming majority of people that I know that know anything about like technology are already using ad block and tracker blocking anyway. Like my whole house is running Pi-hole off of a Raspberry Pi. Before I got that set up, I was using Disconnect and uBlock Origin. And before uBlock Origin, I was using AdBlock Plus. Like it's been close to a decade that a lot of the tech community have been using ad blockers and anti-tracking measures. So don't pretend that Apple just out of nowhere pioneered this. It's just that all this really means is that this technology that has already existed for a long time is going to be put in the hands of people that had no idea it was there. Now, oh my god, there's so much wrong here. So, the next thing, uh, this is a dangerous precedent. Like, oh my god, classic fear tactics. Like, you're not gonna die if you don't get people's private information. Oh my god. Just, okay, we're gonna keep pressing on. Over the last few years, particularly as Facebook various data scandals played out, privacy has become Apple's largest focus and where it's put all of its marketing efforts. Now, here is a very good point. You know why Apple is focused on privacy? I don't think that it's because Tim Cook or Steve Jobs or Wozniak or anybody at any point looked in their hearts and said, "Oh, but I care so much about users' rights." Like, no, Apple has a very long history of not caring about their users' rights or freedoms or privacy or anything of the kind. The reason that they're doing this is because there is an economic protest being staged right now. Because with AdBlock, users have a way of saying no to the current model of how all this digital marketing works. It's just like piracy and Netflix. Piracy isn't piracy isn't a price problem, it's a distribution problem. Piracy rates plummeted when Netflix started streaming and they had everything ever. But then, like a bunch of people want a bite of that streaming platform, and then like copyrights get pulled, shows get sold, all that, and then next thing you know, you have to sign up for like 4 or 5 different streaming platforms, and guess what? Piracy goes up again. That is the people staging an economic protest. And it's the exact same way with all this analytics, targeted advertising stuff. Is, for a bit before anybody knew how bad the stuff really was, we all just got on Facebook and we're like, "Oh, this is free. That's that's neat." But then, once people started figuring out what was going on with that in Google, they were like, "Oh, no, this is bad. I don't like that." And so they started using, all these ad blockers and stuff. And I understand that, people demand that things be free and that we think that harvesting their data is a good compromise, but honestly, it's not. I can't speak for the entire world, but I would much rather pay Facebook the like $20 a year they make off of my data to just use Facebook, with without any fear of my data being distributed and all that, than work in this current model. And so, yeah, AdBlock is a protest. And Apple sees that. Apple sees how upset people are about this. Apple sees how many people are using ad block and such and want nothing to do with this. And they figured that it was a good business move to market themselves on privacy. And I think that Apple is going to make a ton of money because they are siding with the rebels, and the rebels are going to win. We've already seen some legislation out of the EU that crippled this industry once before, and everybody cried about that. And so here comes Apple, pushing the advantage, and they're crying again. So, all right. Now, they say something similar to what I said, but they're all very, very pessimistic and shifty about it. So, in my first debugger column for Medium earlier this year, I pointed out this problem. On the web, Apple blocks ads by default and aggressively controls or reveals trackers. Yeah, just like everyone does. On its own platform, however, apps are free to use as many trackers and ads as they like, because there's no way to see them. Apple uses the guise of privacy, which is a legitimate concern for all of us, to disadvantage a platform that competes. Okay, so they're trying to say that Apple's hypocritical about this. Now, you can go on Apple's website and read their privacy policy, and I think that this guy's taking a shot in the is taking a unsubstantiated shot in the dark here. I really do. Uh, you know, I don't feel like going through my Pi-holes logs to like try and find all these like alleged Apple tracking features. But in Apple's privacy policy, they say that they encrypt and anonymize data. So, given what I just said about them backing the right horse here, I I at the moment believe them. Because if they got called out for hypocrisy on this, then it all comes crumbling down. And Apple sales, last I checked, especially on Mac, have not been great lately. So I doubt they would want to risk screwing this up. Okay, because it is a powerful privacy feature, it makes it hard to debate this move in any constructive way. Personally, I think we need more tools like this, just not from the very platforms further entrenching their own kingdoms. Okay, that does not sound like the crying you did in the rest of this article. Do you suddenly think that it's not the digital marketing apocalypse and the internet's going to die because Apple did this? Are you just making it personal about Apple now? Trying to like, we're switching gears from tracking isn't so bad to Apple's just going to be hypocritical? Apple Sign-In is the ultimate lock-in, along with everything else new we've seen this year, from an iPhone-only credit card to a plethora of exclusive subscription services only available on Apple's own hardware. Okay, okay. You can use Apple Music on, I'm pretty sure, any device. You can download iTunes on any device. There is an iPhone only credit card, but there's a Costco credit card. Like there's a there's a Lowe's credit card. There's a Best Buy credit card. Like that's not exactly something new. Now I get that saying it's iPhone only. That's kind of I get that, but I mean an Apple credit card that runs on only on iPhone. I mean if you were willing to get an Apple credit card, I'm willing to bet that you own an iPhone. So I mean, I can kind of see what the point they're making here. Again, they have like half a point, but that's like saying like, why can I only use Google Assistant on Google hardware? Like, why do I have to buy a Google Home Mini to use Google Home Assistant? Like that's the level of crying we're doing right now. So, Apple Sign-In seals that deal, binding users to Apple's hardware for the long haul, making it tedious to log into services from any other device. There is support for web logins, but it's poorly documented and notably omits the seamless login line shown on the other page. Now, that is a question I had during WWDC is, what happens if you're not on an Apple device and want to use the sign-in with Apple? That is a legitimate concern, and I hope that Apple plays their card right on that one. So, all of the largest tech companies have switched gears to this model, including Google, and now sell a narrative that nobody can be trusted with your data, but it's fine to give it all to them instead. Okay, that's a false equivalency there. Now I know that Google's not great about data, but this isn't a the industry is trying to push a narrative thing. This is a they want to be like people like Google and Amazon and Facebook want to be that terrible, but where legislation passed in the EU, they can't do it to the whole world anymore, and they don't want to like they don't want to have to set up infrastructure to separate what data they can and can't collect like in different countries because that would be a big mess on their end. Now, you can opt out of Google targeted advertising, by the way. I'm really tempted to do a video on that. There's a bitter irony in Apple denouncing other companies' collection of data with a sign-in service and then launching its own, asking you give that data to them instead. Okay, hold on. I thought your problem was that the sign-ins that people were using were giving more information to you. What wasn't that like what the first like half of this article was about? Ridiculous. Instead, I definitely trust Apple to act with my interests at heart today, but what about tomorrow when the bottom falls out of iPhone sales and the math changes? Okay, now that there is again like almost a point here that Apple could eventually turn around and just be like, "Oh, well, we're not making money, so we're going to be evil now." Now, in this very morally lacking data industry here, I don't want to entirely dismiss that possibility, but I find it very unlikely because again, this is like Apple is doing a marketing trick right now, and they don't want to screw all that up by being hypocritical. Okay, now this last part's also very important. During WWC, it leaked that the Department of Justice plans a probe into Apple, Alphabet's Google, and other technology giants, and these type of land grabs are prime examples of manipulating users. If the App Store operated independently outside of Apple, it would be forced to actually convince developers and businesses to use this service, which is the definition of fair competition. Okay. Now, I am all for some trust busting. I am all for breaking up some monopolies. I can name a ton that I hope we go after, but I there seems to be this general narrative surrounding Apple that everybody's like, "Oh my God, we need to break up Apple like right now." And then monopolies that are much more of a threat just kind of slip by the wayside. There was a video the other day when Alexandria Ocasio Cortez was questioning a pharmaceutical industry representative, and one of the other congressmen that was Congress people, I don't know, that was interrogating the same guy or in the debate. He just went on this like whole crocodile tears thing where he was just like, you know, like I don't even remember what it was. It was such nonsense. Basically, he was crying about how the pharmacy like industry, about how these pharmaceutical companies deserve to make more money. But then he immediately points the finger at Apple and is like, "Well, we need to break up Apple." And I'm just thinking, why is this whole thing surrounding breaking up Apple? When again, there are way worse people out there. Like honestly, I think of the conventional tech giants, Google's the one that needs to be broken up. But we have Bernie Sanders and the progressive and just Democrats people going after Facebook. We have apparently everyone going after Apple. We need to look into Amazon and we need to look into Google. And so, yeah, basically the idea is they want to break the Apple Store off from Apple, or the App Store off from Apple, sorry. And I mean, I'm not exactly an insider in app development, but I don't see it as that big a deal. Um, Now, I know it's a little hypocritical given that I was very, very adamantly anti DRM in the iTunes days because it was ridiculous that you'd buy like MP3s from Apple and then not be able to play them on non Apple devices. Like, that was insane. And I can get what people are saying that apps are kind of the same way, but that's also a platform deal. Like, uh, that's that's like saying that Microsoft shouldn't be able to have the Microsoft App Store. Well, it won't run on any other platform, and like Microsoft gets to like say whatever they want and bully the people that develop on that store. Well, just install third-party apps. I'm pretty sure you can do that on iOS devices. I could be wrong, and it sounds pretty Apple to not let them, but you don't have to use only software from that store. Like, I know on Android, there's just a little box in the settings you can go check, and you can always just jailbreak your device. Okay, sorry, I just have to look this up real quick. Oh yeah, you can. All right. You can get them as deb files. Okay, well, it looks like it's a little bit of a pain, but yeah, you don't have to use the App Store to get things. Um, Now you could say something like, "Hey Apple, you should be a little nicer about third-party non-App Store apps." But again, this is a pretty weak argument there. Now, throughout this article, I feel like I'm again kind of like siding with Apple, and I can't emphasize enough, like, you have no idea how much of an Apple hater I've been historically. I think that their hardware prices are insane. I won't say it's bad hardware, but they ridiculously overcharge for their hardware. I think it's even more ridiculous how they're trying to crack down on like forbidding third-party refurbishers and like hardware repair. That's also absolutely insane and an abomination of tech rights. It reminds me of I wish I had it the clip from Futurama where Kubert's just like, I slightly modified a device that I own. We're monsters. But yeah, and again, Apple has a very long history of some like DRM type stuff, but I don't really have a reason to doubt them as far as privacy, because especially since that's going to be their whole big like thing now. But anyway, I'm sorry, I just had to break down this article. It was bothering me. So good night. See ya.